Okay. Should we all introduce ourselves? Maybe I should start first. My name's Fatuma Khaireh, and I'm an audio content producer at Chalk and Blade. Yeah, I work on lots of different kinds of podcasts, so some branded content, some for broadcasters and other for corporate. Yeah, so would everyone else like to sort of like introduce yourself? Maybe I'll go with Renay first. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Renay Richardson. I'm the founder and CEO of Broccoli Content, a production company. We make original podcasts. We got a show out right now called Anthem's Pride, which is a new episode, a mini episode every day of June. Previous to that, it was Anthem's Home, which we made in reaction to our lockdown, at home situation. And that was, we opened submissions to 31 people, and yeah, that came out. I think we've had 14 episodes in April and May, and then we've got another 17 to come. And then before that, it was Anthem's Women for Women's Month. About Race with Renay Lodge I produced, that was #1 last week, and is #4 currently in the charts. So people were learning, wanting to reconnect with race. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we created with Don't Skip and Falling Tree, Boom Shakalaka, we are unedited, the Equality in Audio Pact, which I think we're at 220 companies have signed, including BBC, Bauer, Gimlet, Transmitter Media, and lots of companies, independents and broadcasters around the world.
Kim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm Kim Fox. I teach audio production and journalism at the American University in Cairo, Egypt. I've lived and worked here in Cairo for about 11 or 12 years, since 2009. And I also have a podcast called the Ekia Master Podcast. It means Tell Your Story Egypt. It's a narrative nonfiction about life in Egypt. And we've won a couple of awards. And my students also win quite a few awards for the narrative pieces that they produce. So it's good to be on this chat with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Christina. Previously, I've worked at the BBC and also for Apple Podcasts. I've fulfilled any number of roles, from production to business development and strategy. I left just over a year ago. I left Apple just over a year ago, and I started Don't Skip, which is a podcast service where we help content creators essentially make podcasts and learn more about podcasts, including marketing, monetization, and we have a studio as well. And we do some, white label content and stuff like that.
So Sarah, who's kind of also hosting this as well, has some questions. I'm gonna get those out. Sorry. I forget I'm live in front of loads of people. I'm like forgetting my my passcode for my phone. To be honest, the proposition for this month's Rise and Shine is the future of what does the future hold for podcasting is a really broad question. I think we can talk about lots of different things. We can talk about technology. We can talk about the discussions around like equality in audio. We can talk about COVID and all those other things. It's a really, really great topic to kind of be able to kind of branch into and cover. So maybe it might be good to think about. Sorry, I'm just getting them up. So maybe it might be good to think about what can we, how can we make the world of audio into a better place? Which is, you know, a really broad question, but maybe something we can think about and speaks to a lot of the things that are happening at the moment. Does anybody want to start?
Renay, maybe you should lead with that one, making it a better place.
How can we make audio a better place is the question.
Yeah.
I think it starts with, hopefully hiring better and more inclusively. I think it's important to, if you're a commissioner, if you're a person in power, a position of power, just because a story doesn't directly relate to your life experience, don't write it off. And also collaborate more with people. I think if people collaborated more with not just their friends, with people from different communities, people from different backgrounds, different ages, just different people, not just who you know, I think the content in general would just be better and it would be more inclusive. And I think that would be a great way to make the industry better for everyone, because you'd have a collaborative way of narrating what we're currently in and the future, what the world could be.
Yeah. And this is Kim. I'll jump in and piggyback on some of the comments that Renay made in terms of the inclusivity needs to come across all of the layers that we have. So we need the reporters and the storytellers and the producers and the editors and the EPs, all up the chain. And I'm not saying it needs to be one person on each of those layers. It needs to be all of the if there are 3 or 4 or 5 non-whites in the room, then that's really good. It's, people always say, well, there's one Black person and we've got our person. That's just not enough. And having one Black person on one part of the production process is also not enough. And people are robbing themselves, actually. When I listen to a podcast like Ear Hustle, you know why Ear Hustle really works? Because it's diverse on so many layers. And that's why those stories come out so raw and they touch us in so many different ways. So more people have to get on board. And we don't want to hear the excuse of, I don't know anyone. We're done with that.
And maybe to contextualize a bit more about the podcast Ear Hustle, it's hosted by former and current prisoners of San Quentin Prison. I think that's what's really powerful about it. It's humanizing a community of people, Black men, Black incarcerated men, who are often the most demonized in our society. And actually, as a result of it, one of their hosts, who was a prisoner, has been released, and part of his parole and hearing was about using the material from the podcast. And actually, it can be a really powerful tool for social change and to I feel like humanization is a really problematic term, but just to say that it's giving people are able to speak for themselves, and when they're able to speak for themselves, it's very, very powerful. But yeah, everyone, feel free to jump in if you've got something to add. Hopefully this will be informal and not too structured. So if anything you want to add, please, more than welcome to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that off the back of Renay and Kim, what I hope to see once all of these things are put in place is diversity in the content. I think especially from being behind the scenes, you kind of see the same pictures over and over again, or you hear the same pictures over and over again. And I can assure you, I don't want to hear another business podcast about media moguls or goodness knows who else. So what I really hope when now and in the future, as inclusion becomes more prominent, that even though you're used, let's say formats like conversational and interview formats are the cheapest, even though they're the cheapest, what I hope is that people will think of new ways to reinvent that and just kind of add a little zhuzh to those formats.
I realize I'm still muted. Has anybody else got anything to add to that? Okay, if not, I can move on to another question. Just a kind of maybe piggybacking off that, maybe think about how we can monetize in the future podcasting, because we're in a really interesting landscape at the moment where there is like a huge influx of money coming into the industry, and people are able to sustain themselves, particularly indie podcasters are able to do it in ways that maybe they weren't able to do in the past. So like, how can we make sure that's sustainable for the future? And are there like any innovative ways that we can do that?
I can grab that one. Or, oh, Kim, you're about to.
You go first. I was going to say I'm anxious to hear some of the responses, but you go first.
Yeah, I think there are common ways of monetizing your podcast. One of those, or two of those, being advertising and sponsorship. And it seems to me that that's the holy grail of monetization in the podcast industry. But in all of my kind of webinars and presentations, what I do ask the audience is to kind of look at other ways of monetizing your content. I've come up with 10 of the most popular ways. They're not kind of like final ways, but 10 of the most popular ways. It does include advertising and sponsorship, but also there's paid membership, there's donations and crowdfunding, there's subscriptions, branded content, white label production, which I do a lot of, consulting. Again, I do a lot of speaking, live events where you actually perform your podcast live. Fingers crossed one day we can get back to that. And also using your podcast to leverage job offers. And so those are the 10 ways that I always ask other podcasters to think about when they're monetizing their podcast. Advertising and sponsorship is great, but also there's a bunch of restrictions in those arenas. So for instance, once you kind of have an affinity with a brand through sponsorship, you also have to behave in a way that suits their brand. You're kind of restricted in some of the things that you can say or do, and you have to behave in certain ways. So all the other things tend to give you, as a content creator, a lot more freedom. So
I like that. A couple of those are definitely worth following up on, for sure. I've been trying to explore some of the fintech options, and I haven't been able to grasp it in the way, I haven't been able to focus on it. But when I say fintech, I'm trying to figure out, okay, if we have these saturated audiences, but we want to grow the audience outside of that, then you're going into a different demographic. For example, a demographic that may not have a smartphone, or just doesn't have a lot of money, but might give you a little bit of money. So how do we use some of these fintech apps to send smaller amounts of money to people, digitally, through some sort of an application? And so I've really been trying to explore that. The other monetization platform or model I saw, which is really interesting, comes from the Telegraph. And maybe you guys have seen this, and I don't know what the results of how they do this works, but they do a 2-minute podcast on WhatsApp. And then, so they're just telling you the news, but then they have the links. And so they sort of, if you're really interested in the story, you have to click on the link, you have to get a subscription, and that has to pan out in that way. So I've been also looking at that model, like how to use WhatsApp to monetize your podcast. Trying to get outside of the traditional methods that exist.
And I also think it's about diversifying what you're doing. Like, I always think, because I've worked in TV for years before podcasting, and I think podcasting is really like TV. And if you were a TV, say you were a producer or an actor or a writer, and you have one show, so let's use Issa Rae, because everyone was watching Insecure yesterday/today. And she wrote and produced that show and is starring in that show. That is not her only show. That is not the only thing she's doing. And I think as podcasters or people who are starting podcast businesses, we need to think of ourselves like a TV production house or an actor or a writer for television. Your podcast is not your one stream of revenue. It's one of them, but if you produce the podcast, you should be producing other people's shows. If you host the podcast, you should be hosting multiple shows. You should be looking, it's not just one stream. It's not like, yes, I've got one hit podcast. Awesome, get 5. you know? Or like have your one hit podcast and then you are producing another podcast that you're growing from scratch. You would be co-producing another one with your friend over there. Do you know what I mean? We should diversify. We shouldn't just look at podcasts as one thing and this is how I'm going to get, because I think people get stuck on how am I going to grow my, sorry, there's a delivery happening, so my dog's going to bark in a minute. So people get stuck on how am I going to grow my audience for this one podcast? How am I going to monetize? How can I use ad revenue? People get really stuck on that one thing, whereas in every other aspect of your life, you're not only doing one thing, you're doing multiple things. So I think just think about diversifying the opportunities to grow, to become strong in loads of different ways you can with podcasting. I'll mute myself because of...
I absolutely, oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, I absolutely agree with Renay in diversifying. And I would like to add that I wouldn't and I wouldn't advise people to chase the dream of having exclusive content on certain apps, and partly because, again, unless you're mega famous, that comes with restrictions in terms of your freedom of creativity, and B, actually you can have such a wonderful and varied life if you kind of look outside of continuously pitching for commissions from major podcast apps, and also relatively few podcast apps allow you to pitch in that way. So the only way that you can pitch is through BBC, well, in the UK anyway, BBC. I also know that Spotify commission work, and who else? Global, I think, have also commissioned work, and Audible. Yeah, so, but then once you've pitched to all of them, what then? So you really have to kind of get on with the business of looking at diversifying, just like Renay said, your options. Don't be so narrow-minded in terms of thinking I must get my podcast commissioned.
And I do also think, I remember when I first went freelance, because I used to work for podcast companies, it was when I stopped working in my last job, I was like, I'd never want to be, actually, I think it was when I first left ACAST, I was like, I don't want to be in that position again where I've left a job. I want to be in podcasting, but I didn't know how to make the podcasts. It's like, I didn't ever want to be in that position. You want to get yourself, if you are in podcasting, you should be able to make a podcast. And now, am I saying you should be like winning Peabodys or like, I don't know, Third Coast Awards? Not necessarily, but you should be able to produce a podcast. As same as if you were an actor, you should be able to direct or produce, because otherwise you're just completely relying on someone else, and you don't have to rely on anyone with podcasting. You can completely create your own industry and business by yourself, like you should, but you should learn the business that you're in.
I was wondering, how valuable do you think things like Patreon are? Because there are lots of podcasters who are now beginning to be able to sustain themselves through the platform. Is that a possibility, or do you think that there needs to be a more broader revenue stream for podcasters?
It's you can't just have one thing. Like I don't even rely on like my wage. You know what I mean? It's like, if you truly want to be secure, or there's no such thing as secure anyway, because you can always just lose a job. And so, but you need to diversify your opportunities. So if I lost my job, I know I could go and find freelance work because I can make podcasts. I know that there's just multiple things I can do, because I don't rely on any one thing, because nothing, especially in this climate, nothing is stable, nothing is guaranteed. So you need multiple things. So yeah, Patreon can be an option, but it would be very naive to just have that as, because what if Patreon are like all of a sudden change their terms and like, do you know what, we're going to take 70%, which they can. So, or they're like, do you know what, we're closing the website, which happened with the, what was that 15-second thing that was on, not before TikTok, on Twitter.
Vine.
Vine, yes, yeah. Loads of people built platforms on Vine, then Vine was gone, then what?
Let's say, sorry, Christina.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to add to it. I was going to say COVID was actually really demonstrated those who had diversified their podcast careers from those who didn't. And you could see in some of the listservs that where people were like, oh, does anyone have any production jobs? And then other people who were like, oh, actually, I'm really busy. I've got this to do. I've got webinars to put on. I'm doing remote recordings. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. COVID was definitely demonstrated those who had prepared themselves and diversified their income streams and separated the wheat from the chaff, as they say.
I'm going to throw it open now to the audience. I've got a few questions here. One from Luke Robert Mason from YouTube. He's on YouTube right now on the live stream. What do you hope to see in terms of the platform innovation? What does Rogan's Spotify licensing deal for smaller independent, what does it mean for smaller independent podcasters? What is the best way to grow your audience in 2020?
Can we answer one at a time? So what was the first one?
Sorry, the first one was, what do you hope to see in terms of platform innovation?
I think Kim answered that. She said that, and I agree, ways of monetizing for independent podcast creators. So having some kind of payment or donation feature on the app would be great.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see more of disruption, and not just in how to monetize, but Christina mentioned it before, like how are we telling these stories? How do we do interview podcasts in a different way that's really unique and appealing? So I'm really anxious for us to look at the models and just, turn them around and do something different and fresh.
A choose your own ending feature would be great, actually. I think that would be cool to use in podcasting.
Yeah, and also like learning. So I've been I moved house and I've been doing up my house, and I've had to watch a lot of YouTube to learn stuff because obviously it was in lockdown, so I had to do a lot of it myself. But it was like, if when you're like, I laid some new turf and if there was a podcast, I know it's really boring, but I want to learn the hacks. I didn't have the machines that you need to do it properly, but like, if there was something that tapped into kind of like how Amazon did want to do with the buttons. So, you press a button and then it reorders, like, I've never used one, but like your milk or whatever. But if there was one and I guess kind of like skills on Alexa, or is it Apple as well? I can't remember the thing he's called, the Apple HomePod, that's the one. Yeah. And so but you have like the skills. So it's just like small snippets of information that can improve your life, or small snippets of history. So you learn on the go, because we like information, but we might not want to necessarily sit down. Sometimes I do, and like get deep into like a big series, but sometimes I just want to hear, like you have word of the day toilet paper or something like that. Not that, but just, just things that innovate and like help us with our everyday lives. I think that could be quite interesting with the podcast, working with not just apps, but different types of platforms, different things that we have in the house, like your lamp. I don't know how that would work, but it would be interesting.
It's almost like we need a hackathon for podcasting.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Oh, and then his other question was something about Joe Rogan, wasn't it?
Yeah, about his licensing deal with Spotify. What does that mean for smaller and independent podcasters?
Are we all going to say nothing? It doesn't mean anything.
I don't know.
Unless
I'm getting paid, it doesn't mean anything to me.
I mean, I guess it means there'll be a slot open on the Apple charts since he won't be there.
Exactly. I think
everyone moves up a notch. That's great.
So, I don't necessarily. I don't know what it means, because to me that's like just doing a deal with any old famous person. Like, say Brad Pitt signs a multi-million deal with Paramount Studios. How does it affect the indie filmmaker? It doesn't. Basically, Brad Pitt got his pay. Awesome. But does it affect your short films? No. So I think that's the same with podcasting. I think it doesn't affect us I mean, not like, but independent, you know, it doesn't affect you yet. And it won't, I doubt it will, to be honest.
I think kind of just tells you that there's that star power is kind of in a different space to maybe other podcasters, that like you have those huge people and actually it doesn't necessarily affect the ecosystem just because that person is so separate from the rest of the, like you said, you know, now that he's gone, it just means there's one more slot open.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, a lot of people, Joe Rogan is a lot of people's first podcasts. So if they also did that with The Read, because The Read is a lot of like Black people and people of color's first podcast. So I'm like, if Spotify buy up The Read, then I'll be like, do you know what? Spotify are trying to do a thing. I don't know what they're trying to do, but they're trying to do it. But if it just starts and ends with Joe Rogan, then I'm just like, generally doesn't affect me.
And the last question from him was, what is the best way to grow your audience in 2020? I feel like it's a really good question.
I mean, 2020, it's a weird year.
Right. It's a toss-up at this point.
I honestly would say, if like he's asked specifically for this year, and I think there is no answer. So last week I had the #1 podcast, and it was a podcast I made 2.5 years ago, and we didn't share it once. And I actually was just checking the chart randomly, and I was like, oh. So I think it's people's habits. So you had, first of all, so in March, you know, coronavirus hit. So people's and all of our commutes kind of pretty much went away, and people were looking at podcasts for different reasons. That you wanted to keep up with, you know, lockdown information, how it was spreading. You wanted to look at just, you know, you were looking at the more news podcasts from specific news sources for updates rather than entertainment. You know, every listening habits have become like every day's a Saturday now, because, you know, there are no rules. We get up when we want, we walk to our living rooms, and then we, you know, that's it. Like, there's no commute. And especially now with the civil rights movements and Black Lives Matter, again, people were specifically looking for Black voices. So it's like, if you had a podcast that isn't celebrity driven and doesn't feature a Black voice right now, it's hard to market. You don't know how to market it, because it's not unless it's covering race and what is happening now. Even if it wasn't made now, if it's not covering the issues that people are dealing with and thinking about and talking about now, it's kind of up in the air. So marketing in 2020 specifically it's you know, throw some cards up in the air and good luck. Basically, it's weird. It's a weird time.
Very much so. So I'm going to move on to the next question from Freelance Pod. What might be the dangers of not diversifying staff or content? Some companies need to know what they're missing out on.
So what are the
dangers
of
not diversifying staff and content?
I mean, we're here.
It's for me, I think you're denying yourself and your audience, you know, your chance to grow and tell different kinds of stories. You're stifling yourself, or maybe I should say they are stifling themselves. And we've seen it out there. I mean, I don't really want to call people out, but it's out there and it exists. And when I see some of those really predictable shows that have been around for a while, and I just, you know, just envision them with a little diversity at the table, not a lot, just a little, and it would be a different thing.
Yeah, because I think we're here with like it's not a danger, because like the industry exists, but it's very restricted in who is able to succeed. And yes, I think we are here with we've seen the results of not diversifying yourself. We are in it now, and bar the last 2 weeks, the charts represented it. Where the money has been distributed represented it. Who's in positions of power has represented it. So yeah, I think we can see the truth. We can see it.
I think also to connect Freelance Pod's question to the last question, if you don't diversify, then that makes marketing all the harder, right? So if you've got another podcast just like everyone else's podcast, in a world where has grown exponentially over the past 3 to 6 months, then you will just be lost in the noise. So you have to almost find a way, like, I hate to use this term, but a UPS. So what's your unique selling point? If you don't diversify, and that's both being inclusive of minorities, and also diversifying in terms of format, then you just get lost in the noise. And I guess if that's a danger, then that is the danger.
Another question from the audience from David Orion. What do you think about multilingual / bilingual podcasting?
I think that it's really good. I think that, so we're looking at the most popular markets after English are going to be Mandarin and Spanish. And if you speak any of those languages, you could, for instance, you could be early entry and dominate in those markets very, very quickly if you speak those languages, and be almost the bridge between, let's say, for instance, China and London, or China and New York. You could come up with some really interesting content by speaking another language, and those markets are all still growing in terms of their listenership. So there's a lot of traction to be gained by being early to those markets.
But I also think there's a danger in making sure just because you speak the language, you may not know the culture. And it's really important if you are, let's say you were expanding into Latin America, like, don't just do it, from your Brooklyn or London house because you speak Spanish. Like, make sure you speak and that's the whole thing about hiring diversity, blah, 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 like, make sure you have people in the room and with decision-making power and who can shape the narratives, helping make that content, because it shouldn't just be, I speak like German or Spanish or French and you're, but you're from Oxford, as in the area, not the university.
Yeah, and it's something that I run into a lot because I'm in Egypt and Arabic is the language of the country. So my podcast, we have produced some episodes in Arabic, and it's been extremely challenging because I have a vision for the podcast, and finding a team member who will elevate to the editor level where I need them to be to tell the story that I want the podcast profile to be has been really, really difficult. So when I think about everyone saying, hey, we want to be diverse, it's just like, you have to figure out, I should be training someone in the junior high school level, someone who's a teenager. I need to be training them to be doing podcasts so that they can come up the ranks and they will be at the table and they will know how to do all of these layers. Because even, I teach at an English speaking university. So I'm teaching my students in English and I do not let them use Arabic. And I'm like, because my Arabic is not at that level, and I have to grade your work. I have to assess it. With that in mind, I tell them, I will teach you how to do this in English and you will do it very well. And since you are bilingual, then you can go and do stories after you finish the class in a different language. And I think that's really valuable, that, that they're bilingual and they can do that. And they should be able to add to that pool of voices in Arabic. Like, there's not a lot of Arabic podcasts out there that are really good. There's some out there, but they're not rising to this level that I see some of the Spanish podcasts are doing. And of course, we know, like you said, the Mandarin ones, like the Arabic podcasts have not ascended yet, but I think it's coming.
I think this question is maybe more specifically to Christina, and it's from Florence Lloyd Hughes, and it's what's white label production?
Sorry, I should have explained. Yeah, white label production is where another company will come to you or will approach you and say, hey, we're looking for a production company we've got an excess of commissions. That's how it usually happens. And we're looking for a production company to make this podcast and on our behalf. And essentially, they take the credit, but you take the money. So that's fine.
Thank you for that. So next question is from Samuel Robinson. How can we encourage people who might not think of podcasting as a way to express themselves creatively to do so? And how can we give a platform to grassroots content that doesn't necessarily generate money?
Well, I was speaking to, so I did an interview on Emma Gannon's podcast that's coming out on Thursday, and we were talking about, so if you've listened to About Race, I think it was from episode maybe 3, we started recommending podcasts at the end. And the reason we did that is because we recognized we had an audience. This was when it originally came out. And one of my main things is you have to, it's like, rise the tide. I think Black Ticulate, Ade from Black Ticulate says this, you rise the tide for all of us. My thing is like, you make the industry better for all of us. So the more people in it, it benefits all of us. So when we, so like episode 3, because we were doing the narration as it was coming out, just, because why not? But then basically, Renay, at the end of every episode, we recommend new podcasts. And I think, and I was saying to Emma, she has a platform, like people, if you have a successful podcast, recommend other podcasts and recommend independent podcasts. It doesn't hurt you to do that and do it for free, because it rises the tide for all of us. So like if there are grassroots podcasts or like I remember the first time I went on like Podcast Hour, which is on radio like for Extra, and I recommended Casual Birder because I met the host of it when I was at a conference and she told me about a podcast and I went and listened. And I was like, it's good. I'm not into bird watching, but like it is good, it's well made, she cares about it. So when I had the opportunity to recommend a podcast, because I was like, that's a platform that it's a bigger platform, I recommended her podcast because I was like, we need to recommend people who not necessarily in it for the money, they're not making they're not getting massive numbers, but they really care about their podcast and what they're doing. So use your platform to shout them out.
And can I jump in on I think the tail end of that question was about a nonprofit trying to get into podcasting, but not necessarily for monetization reasons. I think, again, talk about being creative. As a professor, I'm trying to figure out how do I get my students out of the classroom into the community, how to interface with real people and not just me. And that could be a project that you pitch to someone who's teaching a audio production class or a podcasting class. Now, it might be a one-off, like a short series, but it would get you that sort of, for lack of a better word, free labor. But the students are also getting experience from working with, the community on issues that might impact them as well. So that could be what we call community-based learning, which could be very valuable for everyone involved. But again, it takes a little bit of work and some advanced planning, like maybe a year in advance planning. But I think it could be really worth the effort.
I'd love to add to both Renay and Kim's point. There is a company called Podcast Co, and basically they've designed a feature where you can ask other podcasters within your range, like within your listenership range, to either be on each other's podcast. So essentially you cross-pollinate. And I think that will help with both of those things. So to Renay's point, it will help other people who care about supporting each other. They can support each other through Podcast Co by being on each other's platform, on each other's podcasts. And to Kim's point, it will allow for those who are creating non-profit or not-for-profit podcasts, it will help them connect with people who have affinity but are willing to let them be or feature on their podcast for free. So ordinarily, there's no kind of financial exchange. It's just podcasters supporting podcasters.
So we've got a lot of questions. So sorry guys if I'm not able to ask all of your questions. You guys have kindly offered so many. So this actually might be a question that's good for, I feel like everyone can answer this maybe, but I feel like probably Renay will probably have the most to say about this. What are your thoughts on Acast?
They're fine.
That's a good enough answer.
I want to know what the point was behind that question.
Maybe,
I feel like there was more behind that question.
I'm assuming they mean like as a to monetize.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, yeah. And it's like, I always say, right, so when I used to talk, I used to meet with podcasters more. I was gonna say when I was younger, but like, you know, when we could go out and stuff. When I was younger, I had a lockdown birthday. I always used to say, don't worry about ad revenue if you have under 10,000 listens, simply because you want to build an engaged audience first. And it's more, if you have an engaged audience, even if you have a small audience, say you had 5,000 really engaged listeners, or even 100, to be honest, but like, they will appreciate your content. And when it's time to support something you're actually doing, say it is a live show or something like that, they will go. If you worry about, if you get ads on your show too quickly, you can end up annoying your listeners, because if like when you get proper, radio style ads, like we don't like those, like no matter what anyone says, we don't like them. So, and it's not, you haven't picked them for your show. It's different to a host read or anything like that. So I think, just think about what you're putting on your show when you're putting it on your show, is what I would say. But that goes for like Audio Boom and anyone who offers like that kind of ad type thing.
I'd agree with Renay. At that, when you're at the 10, 15,000 marker, maybe even like 20,000 marker, which hosting service you go to that has ad inserts probably doesn't matter that much. It matters more the more listeners you get because of revenue share.
Sorry, there's just a lot of questions and I'm trying to think which ones we haven't covered already, because a lot of them seem to be questions you guys have already answered. So maybe this is kind of maybe backtracking slightly, is how do you find out about commissioning opportunities in podcasting?
I say go for them, but don't pin if you want a career in podcasting, don't pin your career on them. I would much rather, and sometimes it's better for your creative freedom to just go save some money and go ahead and do it yourself. Normally with commissions as well, they like to have heard some work that you've done before. So if you've got a little bit of even if it's just 2 or 3 podcasts under your belt, and they have an idea of your style, because each podcaster does have their style, just like, and Renay's used this analogy before, just like a film director. So each podcaster will have their style, and they want to get an ear for that first before you go and commission to them. Some people are very lucky and their first podcast gets commissioned straight away, but that's an exception. That's not the rule. And I would definitely say, if you're new to podcasting, experiment, express your creativity, and also get the opportunity to express what you're passionate about, because once you're commissioned, like I said, sometimes those reins are they're tightened a lot.
Yeah, and you hear from them. I think the BBC just released theirs. So maybe if you just like did a Google alert for BBC Commission, you'd probably see when it comes. And I think I've never seen a Spotify or Audible like, hey, we're commissioning things. So I guess it's more like follow them on Twitter, maybe. I don't know, and maybe at them and ask, because I've never seen them like announce it or anything.
I think some of them, I feel like Audible and Spotify, maybe not to the same extent, but they have like their own like preferred providers, in that they prefer to go to established production companies. And like, if you want to pitch a podcast to BBC Sounds, the issue that you run up against is that if you're an independent producer, you have to become one of their preferred providers, and you have to like get logged onto their service called Proteus. So if you're not able to do that, then another way is to actually team up with a production company and to approach them. And that's kind of how I got my start, is just by like speaking to different production companies and pitching them my ideas, and then through pitching to them, developing relationships with like BBC Sounds and like Audible and things like that. So if you want to make something that might be something that's useful, look at, you know, production companies who do things that you're interested in. They might say yes, they might say no. It's really dependent on the people, and I feel like it's important to build relationships with people, because like there may be production companies, but actually that's a company, it's not a person. And so it's like finding the right person within that organization who will champion the work that you're doing. And it might just be one person. It might be that, you know, you meet someone on a bad day and that doesn't happen. But I wouldn't want that to discourage someone from going and pursuing these things further and approaching more people. I feel like it's about building that connection, that community, and that kind of can be a way of like getting commissioned. Also, if you build connections with production companies, they might have you know, a brief from the BBC or like a commission that they're like, hey, if you've got an idea, if you want to write a pitch for us and we'll submit it for you. And then, you know, sometimes you end up getting those things. So there's lots of different ways of going about it. Again, it's like, you know, like what all of you said, like, don't pin your hopes on that. It's great if you get it, but equally, like, they're quite hard to come by. But again, it's worth striving for. Also, I feel like with podcasting, there's like, it's hard to get yourself into a position where like you're working independently and then you can monetize it. And it's using those other skills. So like if you're really good at like digital marketing, or if you're really good at working with brands, like that's another thing that I think people need to know about, is that lots of brands are looking for podcasters, looking to make podcasts, and lots of, you know, creative agencies are looking to make podcasts because they're not able to like use advertising on billboards anymore. So there's lots of different things that are happening in the industry, and I feel like it's really good to keep abreast of like not just what's happening in podcasting, but also what's happening in advertising, what's happening in marketing, what's happening in terms of like digital media, so that you're then able to bring those skills together. And I feel like just like subscribing to lots of industry publications is really useful, just to get like a gist of the terrain and things like that, and also just to see what opportunities are happening. Yeah.
But I would say the last Arts Council, we're in England. Well, for those of you in England, I don't know where everyone is. They have officially said on Twitter that they fund podcasts again. So get your pitches in and do what I did, which was make it to the best of your ability, and use whatever your ambitious series is, make it spend as much time as you can on it, make it like literally, yeah, make it as good as it can be, and that could generate loads of work for you, basically, because that's what happened for me. I made one series and it changed my life. That one series.
Yeah, you definitely want to look at those production houses and see what they're up to, and then cater a pitch to them, because there will always be a chance where they're probably looking for something to fill a slot in some way. And even if you don't know anyone there, you know, that cold pitch needs to be really strong, but I would say still do it and have it ready.
Also, follow Spotify UK, because actually look at the hashtag Spotify Sound Up. Because if you're a new podcaster or you're new to podcasting, you're female or non-binary, they are willing to accept submissions. And it doesn't guarantee that your show will be made, but they will definitely, if you're successful in the pitching process, then you will get a lot of help, training and support and mentorship as well afterwards. So those are really key things that need to be expanded in the podcast industry. But look at the hashtag Spotify Sound Up and you'll find opportunities there.
Just another question about audiences. Why haven't podcasts sort of exploded in the same way in the UK as they have done in the US?
Less people. Proportionately, it's actually it's not too bad proportionately. So if you know, per capita, UK is slightly behind. And I would also say that it's a less mature market in terms of content formats. So what you have in the US, and partly, and money has some things to do with this, is that you have your interview slash conversational podcasts, and you have dramas, and you have narrative non-fiction but long form. There's just such a variety of content, which means that the maturity of the market is easier to gain traction. In the UK, we're still, for some reason, highly focused on having conversational podcasts, which means essentially I'm going to interview somebody in some other industry. And what I really, really want from people, and as much as it might be hard, but you can go for Arts Council funding, is to see bigger diversity in the content. And then things will become more interesting for audiences. So the number one reason in a survey why people didn't listen or continue listening to podcasts was because they couldn't find anything they liked. Remember that people are people and they have different interests. So having an entire catalogue of interview podcasts isn't going to capture somebody who loves fiction, isn't going to capture somebody who loves documentaries or true crime. So definitely I would say that the number one reason that we proportionately aren't right where America is because we don't have the diversity in the store, both content and people.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? It's okay if you don't.
She nailed it.
Yeah, you did. You nailed it, absolutely. But it's interesting, you know, in terms of format, I feel like it's just playing it safe. I feel like in the UK, it's like, what is the cheapest thing to make? And it's like, oh, conversational. You don't have to think about editing, soundscapes, all those things that like make a podcast really rich. And not to say that conversational podcasts aren't great, because I listen to loads of them and I enjoy a lot of them. But just to say that, like, that shouldn't be the thing that stops people from making those things, just because that seems to be the largest and sort of like the most dominant in the market. But I feel like we are beginning to see in the UK more people taking risks with the kind of storytelling. Like George the Poet, I feel like he blew everyone out of the water in terms of how he structured his podcast, and he's kind of, again, like set the bar for like a lot of other people to follow in terms of being creative in that space. And hopefully there will be more people who want to invest in making those complex, like narrative, poetic style podcasts.
But again, with him, he had to make it on his own. He didn't need Arts Council funding, but like he did make it on his own, because the industry there was no way that would have been commissioned had it not already been a hit. So it's like we've got to, but this goes across Britain, and sorry, Kim, we're talking about England now, but like Britain in general, on every level of everything that's creative, is risk averse. And so you can, yes, I have a hit podcast, now the BBC come calling, awesome, but you should have been, like, you're our national broadcaster, like you should be nurturing this talent, not coming after its success. And that's the same with TV, film, publishing. Like you have to be a success for them to, like, if you're different, you have to be a success and then they'll come. And it's like, how about like nurture talent and like give us opportunities? It's not me, but like people, give us all opportunities.
I feel like there is beginning to be a sea change in that perspective, in that there's a recognition that if you're not in it with people at the beginning, then you kind of lost them. Like I think about like really big breakout hits like the Receipts podcast, and how they were then on BBC Sounds and are no longer on BBC Sounds and now on Spotify. They're like, you're not necessarily gonna, like, if the BBC had been on that at the beginning of their journey, then maybe it would still be on the BBC platform. But the fact that, you know, they know they can do that stuff without them is really powerful, I feel.
But that's exactly what I mean. Like, I produced that BBC show. Like, I met the Receipts girls episode 2. Apple featured them on App Store episode 2, week 2. So I'm like, so how could we see it, but no one else? Do you know what I mean? Like, we need to like get on it then, don't again, because that's exactly what they were on BBC once they were a hit. And it's like, we shouldn't have to have everything. You shouldn't have to have everything going against you, and then you're proven right. Like, it shouldn't be that way. It should be the other way, especially when you have a publicly funded broadcaster, or especially when you have companies that pitch themselves as innovators. You should innovate then. Don't wait for the hit. Create a hit. Create a star.
But I think we're going to start to see some of this coming down the pipeline. I think you're going to see, say, what an organization like Sundance or Shonda Rhimes. You're going to see people. I mean, we see it already in terms of Hollywood looking at scripts for podcasts, and that means that they're looking for something that's more creative and not something that is just the interview show. What am I thinking? The Flyest Fables, where you get this really creative storytelling. Like, that is a bit of the fiction version. But we need to be encouraging that and really cultivating that kind of the thing that we know doesn't exist, that we know that the charts are full of interview podcasts. So what are we doing to make sure that something more unique is coming up the pipeline? I know that it's out there, but I think people are trying to emulate those talk shows.
I think that goes right back to our very first point. How do you make the industry better? Well, I can't remember the question generally, but it was hire diversity. Then you get it. So then it's like, then you get the innovation, because it's like, it's because the people who have been innovating, it's just you're ignored until you're a hit. And then everyone jumps on board afterwards.
I mean, think about this. What if they go back and look at some of the pitches they turned down? Like, it's probably there.
Even like in terms of thinking of not just like diversity in terms of like race, but also how that intersects with the diversity in terms of skill sets and backgrounds. Like, I don't come from an audio background. I didn't study audio production at Goldsmiths, and I think that there's a particular like pathway. I didn't go through a BBC production training program, and there's a particular like path, particularly in the UK, where it's like, okay, if you have, I'm not going to disrespect anybody who's got those qualifications or anything like that, because they all have their value, but just to say that like there's a very singular pathway into podcasting in the UK over the past couple of years. And it's interesting to see like people who don't come from traditional backgrounds going into and actually making really great content. Like recently, Amalia, which is a Muslim women's publication, they produced a really amazing podcast called 2 Cents, and they made another one about Muslims and like sex and relationships, and it did really well. I think they won an award at the APAs, but like they're not trained podcasters, but actually they managed to produce work that was absolutely amazing, that really spoke to their audience and actually spoke to a broader audience and brought a broader audience into their world. And that, for me, it's really powerful to see people, again, who might not necessarily see themselves audio producers, but actually have all of those skills because they're storytellers, because they all have all those other transferable skills, making really amazing work.
Yeah, I mean, I 100%. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even go to uni full stop. Like, I didn't go to Goldsmiths. And I haven't worked at the BBC, and I haven't worked in radio, and I haven't done audio before. About Race was the first podcast I produced from scratch. And like I said, I got an Arts Council grant, and I just put everything, like I just spent time on it and worked as hard as I possibly could on it. And at that time, Renay, bloody Edo Lodge, was a risk to the industry. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, we haven't won APAs, but it's just because you've got to submit with money, didn't you? So like, if it's an independent podcast, there's only so much money you have.
Another barrier.
Yeah. So technically, we did put in the British Podcast Award. We did get some silvers, because British Podcast Award have a cheap tier. But apart from that, like, we didn't enter awards because awards are expensive. So I couldn't afford, because it was literally going to have to be money from my purse, and like, got to live. So we didn't enter awards. But like, we know it's good. I mean, everyone's proven it's good, but that was a risk. And that was the first, like I say, it was the first podcast I produced from scratch. And it's just, I had to do it because we had to show that you can, but it's not a risk. And that's what I mean by like diversity in of thought, let's say. So I just happen to be Black in that sense. But like, how can you read the Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race blog, not the book, because I approached Renay before the book came out, and not think this girl's a star? Like, how can you not recognize that? And that's the problem with people you have to wait till you're a massive success and then people want to work with you. And it shouldn't be that case. You should be able to recognize, just because you're not necessarily related to your interest, you should, if you are in a position to commission work, and this is the same thing when I worked in TV as well, if you're in a position to commission work, you should be able to recognize the talent regardless of what your experience is. And people, that's the barrier at the moment, and that's why you need diversity in hiring, because people look at everyone, regardless of what they think, they make content for themselves, and they make content, they hire in their image, and they make things to their interests. And if you're not interested in like talking about race, or if you're not interested in a you might turn down a podcast about dogs because you like cats. Do you know what I mean? Like, you need you need diversity in your interests, on your team who make the decisions, because otherwise you make stupid decisions.
I think that's an important point. It's just like being able to have different people in the room so that you're able to champion different kinds of content. But I feel like the further industry has moved on recently, but I feel like it's done it kicking and screaming. It's not necessarily been like an organic thing of like.
But I want to challenge you to, how has it moved on? I'm just curious.
I'm just saying, in the way that like a couple of years ago when I tried to get in, there was just a lot more doors closed to me personally, and I feel like with a lot of my friends it was very similar in that we were making lots of things very like independently and ad hoc, and now actually people are beginning to like listen and look out for that stuff. Not to say everybody's doing that, because again, it's still very, very white. It's still very middle class. It's still very like prescriptive in that, you have to come through a particular channel. But I definitely feel like people who are in positions are being challenged more. And I think that's a really positive thing, in that they're not going to get an easy ride. And I feel like in the past that they had an easier ride in terms of being able to say, well, we're trying. And it's like, well, can I see what's the actionable things? What has changed this year? Can we see a breakdown of who your employees are? Can we see a breakdown, the metrics of what you've commissioned over the past year? And it's interesting to see how, like, I'm not going to like name names, but certain services have very much like done lip service and actually have cut Black content on their platforms. Meanwhile, advertising and promoting on their platforms that they're trying to elevate certain voices by putting people on their discover pages, but actually in terms of commissioning have cut budgets, have asked podcasters to make second series with less money. And that is a huge concern, where there again is the lip service. But now I feel like that they know that there's eyes on them. So actually they're kind of concerned that maybe somebody we're working with might just want to shake the table a little bit and will tweet about this particular thing that they've done, or they might just give us like an email or whatever, and actually they're just a bit more on edge in a way that they haven't been before. And I feel like with a lot of these people, it's like it's not going to be a gentle ride. You can't just like walk their hand through it, because if you do that, nothing will change. You actually have to make things really difficult for them, so that then they're forced to make a change. And I feel like
so I think it's more that we're at the point where people are acknowledging problems. I don't think anything's got better yet, because I think we're literally at the there's a problem stage.
But the equality in audio pack is genius. This brings in the accountability. So thank you, Renay, and your team. Like it does bring us hope, because what we know is that the ideas and the people are there, and we just know that they're being shut out or not giving the opportunities, in the same way that others are. And I think this is a game changer. And this is why, again, if you're a person of color, a woman of color, like, and you got an idea, now is the time.
Oh, 100%. Like, get your commissions. Get that money.
Get that money. Sure.
And I would add to that, I would say that definitely get your content out there as quick as possible, because also the platforms, the apps are looking for that material as well, and they're looking for good material. So while there are still eyes on what these apps look like, while people are still searching for a certain type of content, get in there, and don't even worry too much about the quality. Do worry about it, but not too much. But go for it. If you listen to the Receipts first ever episode, I would say definitely do better, but that didn't matter. It still got featured on Apple Podcasts because it was good content. So even if you're sharing a mic, I don't like it, but if you have to, do it and get your content out there and start building an audience.
And get your Arts Council pitches in this week.
Yes.
Get them in, get your applications in, because they will be thinking, do you know what? Because I read a stat like not long ago where the Arts Council, for every £5 they spend, £4 goes to like a classical type fund application. So that means it's not going where it can be going, but they actively want to do, well, I'm assuming by what I've seen them say. What they're saying, they want to be better. And I know they stopped funding podcasts, because like I've known multiple people who had that response saying, no, we no longer fund podcasts, but they publicly said last week that they do. So I'm saying, get your applications in. Do not complain if you're not getting the applications in. If you haven't got the application in, don't complain.
I think you're right about that. Don't complain, don't get it in. But also, I feel like it's just important to recognise Arts Council. They've broken my heart a number of times over the years. I feel like, you know,
I mean, they broke mine initially, but they in their heartbreak letter, they told me why I failed. And so do you know what? I spent another 7 hours rewriting it.
I think that's kind of the thing where it's like, it's very prescriptive in the way that I felt there are a lot of other commissioners who are just not less stringent, but they're like, okay, we're interested in the idea. I feel like Arts Council, they're like very much like very traditional, and so it just means that the people who know how to do applications will get the money. They might not be the most imaginative, but they're the best administrators.
False. I have never ever written an application like that in my life. A lot of people hire people to write Arts Council applications. I genuinely spent 8 hours, and I would say like 8 actual hours writing mine, because it's so long. And then when they rejected it, they said why it was rejected, and then I spent another 7 hours. So it's like, I'm not into this idea of like, you know, you need to be the right. I didn't know anyone there. I'm not connected in that way. I didn't know anyone. I got my application in, I got the money. Arts Council last week said they fund podcasts, so hold them to it. Get your applications in.
You've heard Renay, get your applications now. Like,
yeah, but let me say,
and go for the 15 grand as well, because I was scared to go for the 15. I went for like 11 or like so like that, because I was like, oh no, I won't get it if I go for 15. I don't know why. Go for the 15. Go for the 100.
Go for all of the money. It's like the worst that can happen is they'll say no. But let me say this about the pitches. Work on that pitch. I really appreciate Renay sharing that she worked like 8 hours. Like, I don't know what people think. Like, you can't just sit down in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour and put together a pitch. Like, you need to invest in that, because this is your idea. It is like a business plan. It is serious. Yeah. And the good thing about it is, if you have one document that has all of the answers, then when you go to do these commission projects, you'll be able to copy and paste the pieces that they need. It's already done and ready to go.
Yeah, and it was also like the 8 hours was also after we had a series idea. So we'd already spent the time, what is the series? And then I'm not even lying. It took I had a lunch break. I had like breaks. It was 8 hours of writing and making sure I had everything in. So is it people, because I remember doing a panel ages ago and people are, oh yeah, but the application is really hard. They're giving you up to 15 grand. Like, it's not going to be easy, but that's free. It is free money when you get it. You don't have to give it back. So like, work on it and get that pitch in.
That's a really important point about pitching. It's a really important skill to have as a potential podcast maker. Just being able just to get your idea out there and to write it out. That's something that I learned early on, is that like, if you have a pitch, then it's your ticket. Like, you know, you can have all these other things. If you don't necessarily have a podcast behind you, haven't made anything, if you're able to write down your ideas and express them to someone who can help you, then that's really great position to be in. So just like, if you have ideas, even if like you're not going to make those podcasts, like I would recommend just having like an ideas dump document where you just dump out your ideas sporadically. Like, suddenly you have something, write it in, you know, in your notes app, and then just like slot it in somewhere. And it's a really great well to like dip into when you're wanting to make something or produce something, because you've kind of already got the genesis of that idea somewhere. But I would, just recommend just doing that if you're like, even if you're not making anything, just to be able to generate ideas is really, really powerful.
I have an entire folder full of ideas. So just to give you guys some advice, what I did is kind of developed a template, like a pitching template. And then I just use that repeatedly. If I get an idea, I put it down, bullet points, put it away, go back to it later. So Renay, for her particular, for her arts council pitch, yes, she did have to kind of sit down for 8 hours because she started essentially from scratch. But you can do that, you can start preparing in anticipation for those funding opportunities to open up. So that's what I would say. Create a template, have a folder in your little Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever, and write down all of your ideas in a nice, clear, concise way, so that when you're ready, so that when the opportunities open up, then you're ready to pitch.
Just another question from the audience, from Daisy. Do you think we'll see the same kind of branded sponsorship that we see in the US, i.e. Squarespace and HelloFresh in the UK?
Yeah, they already do that, don't they? I'm pretty sure. I've used Squarespace multiple times with my codes. And I had a HelloFresh for a while, but they don't do good vegetarian food. They do, but it's very not enough protein.
Does Daisy mean with British brands? Is that what Daisy means? Or
I think as in like sponsoring UK podcasts.
They do.
Oh yeah, they do.
Yeah. Like Emma Mattresses sponsor, and Squarespace sponsor British podcasts, and HelloFresh do here.
I think
not MailChimp, but I don't know. Yeah, they do.
Also, just
they've been doing that for years as well. Yeah.
Just actually, this is from me about branded content. So in the US, you've got a lot of like Gimlet have been really big on this, creating branded content for lots of different companies. Do you think we'll see increasingly those things happening in the UK?
Yeah, Pick4You and Fresh Air do it already. Also, go ahead.
So there you go. Yeah, I think the people have been doing it for years already. It's just you probably didn't realize it was branded, or you just paid less attention maybe. But it's been happening for years. Yeah.
Happy Mum, Happy Baby was branded content. I don't think it is anymore, but it was Fisher Price, wasn't it, or something like that? So. Yeah.
Listen,
well, Kate Middleton's on your podcast.
Yeah. But the thing is that there's those kind of really big sort of celebrity-driven podcasts that seem to do really, really well. Like whatever platform they're on, they seem to have a huge audience. Like I'm not necessarily the biggest fans of those podcasts. It's just not why I feel like they're a lot too interesting stuff, but it's not my cup of tea. Like how do independent creators break through that not branded, but that celebrity content? How are they able to sort of like float up and become more visible in the face of it?
It's being original. Like I don't think I really make celebrity content, and it's just you just be original and have a good idea. Because I made one, so I did a white label. I made a show, a music like that featured celebrities. But it's actually it was much harder to make a show with celebrities than it is to make a show with like just normal people. So it's just if you have an original idea and you try an original format, you'll rise up. And everyone needs to remember, podcasting is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, don't think, oh my God, like there was an article a while back and they had 6 weeks in there, like we've not become famous yet, and they quit. And it's like, guys, you've been doing it for 6 weeks.
I saw that, yes.
I think it's like the slow burn. It's like some podcasts are doing really well in the UK and you might not necessarily even know them. Like there's one podcast I listen to a lot called Trash Futures. It's like a political sort of comedy podcast, like in the sort of like vein of like Red Scare in the US. But they've got like they get $8,000 a month on Patreon. And not many people in the UK podcasting industry would know that's a UK podcast, but they're able to do very, very well. And I think a lot of the people who work on it actually do work full-time in other parts of the podcast ecosystem. And so you don't even need to be like a huge like celebrity podcast or even well known in the industry to be able to sustain yourself. You can just be very, very niche and like be a like comedy, political, left-leaning podcast and have your niche, and actually not necessarily be the most highly produced or like, you know, or just, you know, it might be a simple conversational podcast and you're able to get really big guests. And they often get really huge names on there, like comedians and things like that, who are really like dedicated to the podcast and you absolutely love it. But that's just to say that there's so many ways that you can make things that it doesn't necessarily even have to be that visible. And also they're like 200 episodes in. So like, I feel like people shouldn't complain that they don't have an audience until they've like been at it for a year. If you've been at it for a year,
you've got to be at it. Like you can't think, oh my God, 6 weeks has passed and like we've not got the Squarespace aren't sponsoring us. And it's like Christina said though, we are behind in the type of content we generate here. We are still like heavy leaning comedian and his friend, or comedian and her friends, or TV presenter and her friends. It's like, yes, cool, but we will start to lean away from hopefully the whole celebrity and then going for a story. Like, what is it about? What are we saying? What does this podcast make you feel? What does it make you think? What does it make you action? What does it make you do? I think hopefully will lead more to that rather than leaning heavily on the celebrity stuff, because it's kind of like and if you notice, it's the same people going on all the podcasts.
Exactly. It's like it's sort of very I'm not going to use that word, but it's like just a merry-go-round of the same voices, and I think sometimes it's a bit, for me, really boring. I don't really listen to those kinds of things. I like The Receipt, I like sort of like those kinds of podcasts, but I feel like generally the UK, like there isn't anything that really like grabs me, because it's all very much like middle-class white people talking about middle-class white things, and I don't relate to that stuff. It's for some audiences, but not for me. But like just two more questions from the audience. But obviously we've got more questions, but just two more right away. One is about like, where do you find the application for the Arts Council grant? Someone's asking where to look for that.
I would say if you need to ask me that, you should not be writing your application, because it's called Google and it's called the Arts Council website. And to be honest, sorry, I'm very tough on these kind of things, because I'm like, it is so hard. And I've been saying the Arts Council thing for years. And I always get met with resistance because it's hard. It's like, it's not, I mean, it is hard. But like, you have to be able to, on their website, they literally have funding. Literally, it says funding. Like, and look at, they've got multiple different funds. Like, it's for all kinds of things. Like, if you were a museum, if you're a library, if you were a writer, if you're an artist, if you're like a podcaster or whatever, they've got so many different things. But you have to read it. I'm not going to post a link. Sarah, don't post a link. You have to read the fund and read all of the funding opportunities and find out what you are, what's available to you, because like I said, there's so many different ones, but you have to do the reading, otherwise you won't get past the application.
And this other question is about like, what's the key part of a pitch?
Can you repeat that? What's the what?
Like,
I think that depends.
I feel like that depends too. I feel like with pitching, it's about the genesis of the idea. It's not like there's no particular structure. Sometimes you can pitch something and it literally can just be like a piece of prose that's like really lovely, well-written prose, or it could be bullet points. Like, it really depends.
I used to work in TV. I used to work for the exec producer of Peaky Blinders, and he like exec produced Billy Elliot and things like that. And he used to say, when we used to do development meetings, he used to say, you have to be able to explain the idea in a sentence. Very hard. But he used to say, if you can't explain the idea in a sentence, you don't have an idea. And that comes from like in America, like the elevator pitch. You could, and this still could happen, like you could be in an elevator in America and you could just be with the head of someone and you need to explain your idea. You've got one floor, between 1 and 2, you've got to explain your idea. If you can't get the bullet points out, you've got to explain the idea in a sentence. So I think that should be like the tagline, I guess. That should be where you start, at least. Be able to explain it and get someone interested in this with one sentence.
I feel like that's Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it? It's like just being able to explain your idea, and like I feel that's kind of where you have to. Sometimes it just comes straight out of the bat, and your idea is like out there, and literally the first time round you've got it. Sometimes it takes a lot longer to be able to like hone in a pitch or an idea, or even to get to like the genesis of what a really important story is. So like this time last year, I had made a podcast, but it was like with a bit of money. I feel like it was Arts Council funded money, but it was really indirect, and it was for Somerset House, and it was very, very like informal. Literally interviewed all my friends who are artists and creatives, and I approached this organisation called the Creative Society, who are really amazing. They support, like, if you're under 30 and you are based in London and you want to get into the creative industries, they're a really great organisation to speak to. So if you just Google Creative Society, they're really amazing people. So they got me in contact with a production company, and then I pitched them an idea, and then we pitched something to BBC Sounds, and actually it did get commissioned by BBC Sounds, which is very, very rare. And I got like a bit of money to do a pilot, and it was a really great idea. And I think it's like, I'm not going to talk about it, but just in case it happens, because I hope it does one day. But it was a really, really great idea for a podcast. But there was and they did take a huge, huge risk with the idea that I had sort of expressed. And the big concern is like some issues around like copyright that couldn't be sort of like worked out at the time. So it got decommissioned, which is something that doesn't really happen that often. But it's just to say that like sometimes you can literally straight off the bat have like one idea that's really, really strong, that lots of people believe in. It might happen, it might not happen. I feel like my case is very, very rare in the decommissioning process. Usually if they get to that stage, it happens. But as I said, like it was a very, very like complicated process. But like it's taken me now a year to be as good as I was when I pitched like initially my really great idea. In that it takes a long time to like get into that space of writing pitches. I feel like it's a continuous habit, and that like the key part is not necessarily like a useful thing to think about right now. The thing should be getting into the muscle memory of writing things like that, and getting into the mindset of repeatedly writing pitches.
I mean, I'm really rubbish at writing pitches, I'll be honest. But I have loads of ideas in my notes app. Yeah. And so I like to, if I can get in a room.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I can pitch you I could do that one sentence. I could pitch you, but I'm actually rubbish on paper.
Renay is really good at articulating her ideas, and I think perhaps verbally. So I think perhaps that you need to have one or the other. Either you're great at writing pitches, so you can communicate very, very eloquently in some kind of text format. And you're kind of good at kind of finding the right people, hitting them up on LinkedIn, and then asking for their email address, approaching them in the right way. Or you be like Renay and you network the hell out of your life, and you go out and you meet people and you just approach people and you kind of be bullish in all the right ways, and and get into rooms and get those meetings, and then say, here's my idea. You come into that meeting with all the enthusiasm, and people will just light up because you're lit up. And I think you kind of have to find one or the other, and that will lead to a degree of commissioning success.
I realized I'm not on mute anymore. I was like, am I on mute? Like, no, I'm not. So is there any kind of questions that you guys want to ask, or any points that you want to raise?
I have a query, something that I'm just trying to sift through in terms of the transcripts. So the other day I was working on a transcript and I was cleaning it up and I was using Descript. And I think I knew this before, but it allowed me to replace a word and the voice was the same. And I thought that was really eerie, but I don't know if you guys have had that experience. Have you tried it?
So you're saying that you changed, so say the person said and you changed it to the, and the voice said the. Oh, wow. Because I found,
the person says suddenly, and I'm like, well, I don't really have that. And I take it out and I say, he says accidentally. And it would be in that person's voice.
Because I have found the transcript, sometimes it is creepy when like, so obviously when you put it through the program and it knows what the context of what you're talking about. So when it predicts what you were going to say, you're like, how did you know that? And I'm like, wow, this is creepy, but like it helps.
Or if it knows you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when I'm using, we're sort of doing the trade-off. Like I get it to do a transcript for free, or I get X amount of minutes. It's just like, well, yeah, but now they have my MP3 file, and yeah, that's a thing. So I really just gave that away, and I'm getting back this transcript, but now they have my voice, and apparently they're doing AI so that they can then change these words. And, when I think about, this future of podcasting, it's like, yeah, we want our content to be searchable, and having a transcript does that, but is this the cost?
And I think it would be like the nervous thing of, I just remember when I learned how to edit audio, I was like, oh my God, I can't trust anything. Because I realized, I was like, I can make people say anything. And that was, so I think there is, in the future, I listened to this show called Reset, and it basically just scares me of technology. But I think there is in the future, like we will have to be, just in general, the public will have to be very wary. And it's sad, but we all will have to be wary of what we're hearing and whether it's true.
For sure. I would say to the transcript point is whenever a service is giving something away for free, it's for a reason. And so they almost are certainly teaching their AI how to, they're probably learning accents, they're probably learning voice tone. There's a whole lot of things that the AI is learning in terms of when essentially you transcript your audio. To Renay's point in terms of editing, we've always had to do it though. We've always had to be media savvy. Sadly, in the last, let's say 3 or 4 years, many of people have proved to me that they are not media savvy, but it is our job to be more media savvy, and we've always had to do it, whether that was photography. We know that, we know in the Mark Duggan case, for instance, in 2011, was it, that they cropped the picture to make it look like he was more of a criminal than he was, when actually that original picture was at his daughter's funeral. So there are lots of examples where we've previously had to be a lot more media savvy and media literate. And I definitely would say that we have to make sure that we take those skills from photography and from news sources and apply them to what we listen to. And so if that means that you want to go ahead and fact check, go ahead and be your own fact checker. Don't always rely on the person who produced the show to fact check.
And I think it will be into education, because we saw it last week with the horse that ran away. And the horse basically ran its, what do you call it, a rider? I don't know what you call the person who rides a horse. I'm going to call it a rider, but I know it's not called that. Jockey, that's the one. It ran really at speed into past traffic lights, and the police officer, jockey person who was on the horse got taken out by the traffic lights. But actually, when they were showing the videos on the news and whatnot, it was protesters pull officer off horse, because you just saw the ending of the video, you didn't see the traffic light. But I think I've been in media since I was 14 years old, so I'm like, I can see all the strings, but the average person hasn't. And I think we need to, as a future, because this is the future of podcasting and it should be the future of audio and whatnot, we should have these things in education. People should be at school. We need to be editing audio, and we need to be editing, and not just in your media class, it's life. Like, you need to be editing photos. You need there should be a task where you could be like, take this photo and make it just the most unrelated scene you can. Take this audio and just change it into something that you can, because then people will understand to not believe everything they hear, which is a shame, but that's the way we're going. And it's like, in order to, when you see headlines and when you see videos and when you listen to audio, like, just double check like what actually happens. And I think that needs to be in education. It needs to be everywhere, because I know for a fact, like, you know, like my family in Essex are believing like what they're seeing on the news, and I'm like, it's just, and there's things where you can't even have the conversation about it because they don't get it.
They're too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, so it's like it needs to be education in order to, because audio for certain, and the way that AI and the way that the, you know, when you use the transcripts and things like that, are learning the skills of like our voices and how to manipulate those into things for our benefit and now, but we don't know how it's going to be used. So it's just, it's got to be part of the education to show how media, as in not the media, how you can use media to your benefit and how it can be used. Yeah, Kim, go on. You said, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I want to ask about the remote recording. I want to know what you guys are doing for your remote setups.
Do you want to go? Shall I go? You've done a lot of remote recording.
I've done loads. We've done loads of remote recording.
Yeah, exactly. How did it go for you for your shows? Because you launched the show while we've
launched 2 new series remote while we're in lockdown, and we're going to continue. Like I talked, like, we have our meetings every day, and we don't see ourselves going back to what, I mean, I don't see myself going back like this year, unless like I really, really have to. But I think, yeah, so there's 2 ways. We have with biked mics to people, like we've got a Zoom recorder, you know, we haven't actually got a desk mic stand, but we basically take a shotgun mic, an XLR, and a Zoom and some batteries. And we make sure when you turn the Zoom on, it's already set, and then we bike it to them. So it's not in so it's in a bag, so they literally take it out, press record, and use. And the other way we've been doing it is by getting if they're not in London, because we've done for Anthem's Home, for example, we had people in Portugal, Nairobi, and things like that. People were around, and we couldn't bike them a mic, so we would get them to record on their phone. Because using your phone is pretty good. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just saying great. So yeah.
In terms of the way that I've been working, like we've been using Squadcast. I don't know if any of you've used that before. And also doing that thing of, and actually sometimes we found it very difficult even using that service. And we've tried to find workarounds. And one of them is actually like it's just making sure that people in very, very quiet spaces and using Zoom to record. But that's for very particular things, or sometimes even just like, you know, getting a courier bike and giving someone a mic. So just like, I feel there's lots of different ways that you can make audio during lockdown. And I feel like not being committed to like one type of, being very agnostic when it comes to making content, just like using whatever's available to you, or like even thinking about the limitations of the guest. Some of them might not necessarily be able to, you know, operate things. And you're right, like using, you know, voice notes or something like that to be able to record things. I feel like it's just, working out what's the best way for that particular person and like what supports their needs, and also like what supports your needs as well.
I can make a recommendation. One thing that I found really useful to use with a phone, and that I could send to somebody without worrying that it was going to cost me a fortune, is the Rode lapel mic setup. So then you've got that connection, and then the mics go into here if you've got a iPhone, and if not, then you can just attach the jacks in there, and you can record pretty good quality audio from your phone, and get them then to just send you the audio file. Luckily, you can now. I remember the days when you had to edit in WAV file, but now you can edit MP3. So even if they can't change the settings on their phone, And sometimes it just wasn't worth the tutorial. I'd just get them to record the MP3 audio, and and you'll get a pretty good, decent sound from that.
Nice. Those are all good ones. I'm working on another podcast, and we have some it's going to be challenging. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to go forward.
Jaja even did an interview where she had like the person on a telephone, like a landline, and then they had their mobile. So like we've done all kinds of different things. Yeah.
You still have their landline, Renay?
I mean, you should for emergencies.
Right.
I have one in the cupboard. I haven't like plugged it in yet.
Have you got any other sort of like questions, remarks, or anything like that?
I would say I just wanted to, for future proofing or like business or podcasts, if you want to expand, it's to do with like what Christina was saying about having your ideas prepared. My thing is write a business plan. So if you like start your production company or your like podcast network or anything, write a business plan, because that was one of the best things I did when when my Sony deal happened, I didn't know it was necessarily, I mean, obviously when I was doing the deal, I knew, but like my first meeting, I didn't know why I was there. and I didn't know until I was in the room and they were like, so what do you need? Like, how can we invest, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I didn't know what this is about, but I actually have a business plan that I can send you later, because it's already written. So after my meeting, I could go home, just literally add a couple shows that I'd made since I wrote it. But then I sent it that day. And it's like, be prepared for opportunities. Like, don't block your blessings by not being prepared. Like, if you're starting a business, have a business plan. If you have an accountant, if you want to be a producer, like have some kits, have your software. Like be prepared for future opportunities, and it's to do again with diversifying what you're doing, because it is like, obviously I'm not prepared for everything, because there's certain things I don't know what's going to come, but like have multiple things on the back burner so that when someone asks you a question, you have an answer, or you can send them a document.
I think it's really important. Also, just thinking about this as a business, because I think a lot of people think about podcasting as a hobby, and I think that it can be a hobby, it can be something that you don't necessarily monetize. But if you're serious about it, think of it how you would do if you setting up any other kind of professional business. Also, there's money to be made, and also you can forecast. It's something that my creative friends have kind of showed me the way in that terms of like being able to think about yourself as, not just as a creative person, but someone who's able to kind of monetize your business, and kind of like coming on from your earlier point, Renay, about diversifying what you do in that space. Like, yes, you can make podcasts, but can you make podcasts for other people? And you're increasingly seeing that people who you think are on, camera talent actually going back and becoming producers on other people's podcasts, which I think is really great. I feel like it's good for the ecosystem, because it kind of shows you that you're able to, that you can diversify your skills, and it's not like there's no gatekeepers, that you don't necessarily have to be someone who's like spent 10 years engineering and know every single thing about like podcasting and know off the bat, okay, the difference between a WAV file and an MP3. You can learn those things. Those are skills that you can acquire, and actually those shouldn't be the barrier of entry. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway point, is that the future is going to make the barrier of entry much lower, but then at the same time, because the barrier of entry is lower, it just means there are more people in that space, which means that you have to be more skillful in other ways and adapt in different ways. I feel like just not afraid.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like, with the whole, because like people every now and then throw away like the podcast industry is so saturated, and I'm like, okay, cool. So is books, so is film, so is television.
There's nothing.
So is music. 40,000, over 40,000 new singles get added to Spotify every single day. So it's like there's not that many podcasts. So it's like we need to stop that whole like, oh, it's saturated. It's not. It's like there's competition, so it means you have to up your game, and just up your game by making more. And people, you know, there is, you know, oh, it wasn't mixed this way, oh, blah, 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 the music's too loud, or oh, da, da, da. Whatever, the content was good. That's all that matters. Like, so just focus on the content and focus on being different to what is out there. And then you'll find your audience, because there's enough space for everyone, and podcasts are online, so think go globally.
Also, a tip, just to backtrack a little bit for planning for the future, I would definitely say save some money. When you're starting out, especially if you're hoping to produce other people's content while you're also making your own, and you're kind of maybe even leaving a job or going down to part-time, save some money, because that will definitely it will make you feel more secure in when you have downtimes, which inevitably you will have downtimes. And for some people, they've recently had 3 months of downtime. So definitely save as much as you can. And one of the reasons why as well, that feeling of security, it helps when you go into meetings. If you feel secure when you go into meetings, perhaps you might be could be just networking, perhaps you're planning to pitch an idea. If you feel secure going into those meetings, they tend to go a lot more smoothly, and you give the right vibes to the person that you're speaking to. So they feel, if you're confident, they're confident. If you're desperate, they're like, why are you desperate? So
yeah, or hide the, because I'm someone who I've never had a safety net. I am not a saver, and I find myself in situations I'm like, damn it, this is why people say you should save. But the key is also, yes, I would say if I could go back, I wish I had saved. But I've never ever had next month's rent saved. So I'm always like, yeah, it's not a good way to live. But it's worked out, so it's fine. But I would say also believe in yourself, because that's how. Because I remember when so I went to the Brit School and stuff. I was a terrible actor, but I did go. But they show you when you go to auditions, you can sense when an actor really needs the job and versus when they want the job. And you want to, when you get the meetings, you don't want to convey I need this for rent next month. You want to convey I want it, or you want me because it's awesome. So it's about a mindset of believing in yourself. Yeah, I think it's believing in yourself. That's the key thing. Your confidence in this industry can get knocked, man. It can get knocked. People say your ideas are bad. People say you haven't got the skill. They're you didn't do your 10 years at the BBC. There's all these things already in the industry. But just believe in yourself, and believe just be arrogant. It's fine. Don't be humble. Because if you need that belief in order to convey the passion for what you're doing. And if it is, like I say, I'm not good on paper. I hate, actually, this is why I find pitching to BBC difficult, because you have to do it on paper and it doesn't make sense to me because I can't do it. But if you can meet a person and you can convey your ideas, like when I said the Sony meeting, I conveyed what I wanted for Broccoli. What I wanted it to be, I said it in the room. And I had the idea and I knew what I wanted and I had my mission statement already. So it's believe in yourself, because yeah, it's not great not having a safety net, but if you can hide that you need it, the opportunity, that also helps.
Also, I find personally being slightly delusional really helps you. I feel inflate your sense of self. I feel so many times we're told to be as you said, humble, and every time, and also I feel if you listen to what other people think about you, then you get trapped. And I feel it's really important that we just that you have this idea of what you want. And I think if you have an idea of what you want to get out there, you can then create it. But if you don't have that creative vision and that possibility of something outside of your current reality, then you're kind of stuck. And I thought that's kind of what is really powerful, is being a creative person. So I feel actually in any industry that you're in, the ability to visualize something that doesn't already exist is really powerful. And I would say just go with it. And sometimes you might not necessarily have the skills, capacity, the finances to make it. But if you have that vision, then you can try and find those people or those things that can help facilitate that.
And that's the key, actually, having the vision for what you want. Because sometimes, like, my company got invested in, but investment can go terribly wrong if you don't have vision for what you want. Because you can have a bunch of money, you're like, I don't know what to do, and then you start making you just start saying yes to everyone, and you're like, oh my god, I need to quickly make that celebrity content, and then you've kind of gone wayward, and you've gone away from what your original vision was for your business or your podcast or your company. So it's like, have a vision and stick to it. Like, have if you can make not a formal mission statement, but if you have a purpose for what you're doing and you see where you want it to be in 5 years, 10 years, like, once you get investment or when opportunities come, you know what the right one is for you, and don't be afraid to turn down ideas and turn down working with things, because actually I've turned down so many things, but it actually empowers you and it makes you more bolder in your decisions. I've turned down loads.
I feel that's a good position to be in, the power to say no to things and no to people, because I think sometimes what you end up doing is it's that desperation thing, and you end up working with companies or individuals who don't align with your values. And I think when that happens, the recipe for disaster. And I think often you can see right at the beginning of a project where you're working with someone or with an organization, and the culture just isn't right. And then that kind of really puts everything on the back foot. So even if you do try and make things good, it's like that initial disconnect is very, very hard to sometimes, I'm not going to say universally, but I think often it's hard to address, because then the cultural things, in terms of, misogyny, racism, sexism, that you'll just experience those things where it's like, okay, I don't want to have to deal with this. It's hard, I recognize, because you know what, not everyone has that position to say no to money.
I've got to say, I know people think I'm the man now, but up at a good 9 months ago, I was skint. But I was still tailing down ideas, because I don't know, stubborn, I guess. And not, like you say, not everyone is in that position, but I need to be able to go to sleep at night with a clear conscience. And I sleep like a baby, because I know I do not work with the companies that are bad. I don't work with the people who are holding Black and brown people back. I don't work with the people who put out hateful content. I don't work with them. Even when I was a freelancer and needed it, because I was renting in Dalston, my flat weren't cheap, but if I didn't have rent, I was still saying no, because I have to be able to sleep and know myself that I haven't gone against, because sometimes there's a bigger movement, there's a bigger thing than me, right? And it's like, if I take opportunities or something that will put down and make life harder for other Black and brown people, I won't do it. I'm not going to platform, I'm not going to co-sign, I'm not going to work with companies who hold us all back. I'm not going to work with companies who don't hire us. I'm not going to do it. So now, yes, am I in a privileged position? Yeah, but this is brand new. This is not even a year old. So it's I think it's really important for people to understand, I truly understand what it's like to not know, right, if you're going to make rent. I've always said Asda is down the road. I am not proud. I will take it.
I'm very much of that opinion as well.
With Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco, do you know what I mean? I could do it.
It's
yeah. I wouldn't, but I've never, and I don't think I hope I don't, and I hope I don't change. But currently I'm not compromised on what I believe, because I think there's a bigger issue around co-signing companies and working with people and working with companies that oppress us. And I just won't do it.
People need to do their homework. I mean, like you said, that Google is very powerful. You get out there and it is your opportunity to say, do I want to work with these people? Because if you know who they are, and chances are that reputation is out there, especially if it's not a good one, do your homework.
Yeah, Google, please Google. I always feel like I'm the only person who uses it. But Google, guys, it's free.
I think it's also really useful if you're able to set boundaries. So even if they're not on your blacklist or your block list, I think we're going for block lists these days. We're not doing black and white lists. Google today said they're not doing black and white lists. They're going to do block lists and allow lists. So if they're not on your block list, remember that you need to set boundaries even for people on your allow list. or even your mediocre list. Like, you do some good things, but I'm not sure. Just definitely say, I am prepared to work with you on this particular project, but here is what I would like to see. Here are the people I want to work with. I have to have at least one XYZ on my team. I have to be able to interview somebody from this particular background. I need to make sure that I'm respectful to that particular culture. So even on your allow list, make sure you keep an eye open for setting boundaries.
Yeah, people forget that. I remember when I made a branded podcast and it was all white people. And I said, I'm not making that. And they were like, no, but the brand has to approve everyone and they can't be influencers and blah, blah. I went, okay, I, Renay Richardson, am not making that. And so I said, I'm not. And I'm nobody. But you still have power. So it's like, you have power regardless of what position you are in. Like, especially if you're the host, you have power to say, like, I'm not going to do this unless I have, and I don't want to be the only person of color on the team. You can say that. I don't want to be the only Black person on the team. You can say that. Like, you have power, use it.
I feel like that's something that's really important, is that not to give away your power to people just because they may be the people paying your bills or they might be the people commissioning you. That actually you do have a sense of ownership and control over the kinds of work that you're doing. I just want to we're coming up to 9 o'clock. We're like 5 minutes away, so we're kind of wrapping up. But I want to ask you this kind of question to all of you. What do you want from the future of podcasting and audio?
I personally want more Black and people of color and people, sorry, my dog, to get funding. I don't want to be one of the only Black women in audio who has had a JV with a major company. I want there to be lots of people so that we can collaborate and so that I can ask you questions and you ask me questions and that we all rise up. I want the money to be spread. Yes, Joe Rogan, awesome. Get your money. I get it. But I also want the Reeds to get their 100 million. I want the, other podcasters to be valued as much as Joe Rogan and people like him are valued, and the Gimlets and the Ringers. And the money should be spread for all of us. Don't just don't just invest in people who have established track records. Invest in new people, help people grow, help people scale, help people start businesses. So that's what I hope.
I'm hoping for more opportunities that come in the form of fellowships and grants that people can afford to, like you said, maybe not necessarily quit your job, but take a break, take a sabbatical and go and work and learn this thing more deeply. So I feel like we need to have the freedom to do that, oh, my bills are paid and I can still go and learn this other thing. So I am looking for this pot of gold for us to get the training and work our way up the pipeline.
I am hoping for more minority ethnicities in the Anglo-Germanic world. I'm looking for them to be more of those in positions of commissioning, more of them in positions of editorial selections, and more of them in positions of hiring managers. But also off the back of Renay's point is for more companies. I'm very much a believer in there's a two-pronged attack here when it comes to diversifying any media space. And that is working in the major companies, but also having companies that we can go to, quote unquote, that in the face of adversity, anyone can come to Renay, can come to me, or any of the other Blacticulates, we are unedited, can come to us and say, I've been struggling to get a break in the major media companies. Do you have any positions? I'm willing to take on an internship. I would like for us to be in the position one day to say yes to as many people as we can. That's what I would like in the future.
Oh, really great. Maybe I might add like what maybe I want for the future in terms of podcasting and audio. I think all of, like with all of you, want, you know, Black and brown people to be like literally at every single like part of the food chain, from like, you know, entry level right up to like executives and commissioners. I think the big thing that I want is for there to be sort of like maybe to educate audiences a bit more about podcasts, because I think that a lot of people don't see it as for them. It's like, okay, podcasts are for something else, somebody else. That's not for me. Yeah, there's like there'll be my friends who'll be like, yeah, I've heard of the Receipts, I've heard of Say Your Mind, you know, but they're like, okay, those podcasts aren't for me. I want audiences to think actually like to be able to have the confidence to look for things that they're interested in and actually just like feel more comfortable being on the App Store, like listening to podcasts, getting into that culture. Because I feel like once you get people cultured into listening to podcasts, then they're much more open to finding other things and exploring. And I kind of think that's my entry into podcasts, just like listening to one thing and then getting like sucked into it. And also just having friends who share things. It's like most of my friends actually don't give two hoots about podcasts. Like, oh, so you work in podcasting, and literally like it means absolutely nothing to them. It's not their sphere of interest, you know, which kind of breaks my heart a bit, because I'm like, you should be listening to the stuff that I'm making, but you know, you can't force everyone. But yeah, just to educate audiences. Yeah, we're kind of actually we're almost literally to the end. We've got like 1 minute left, so if anyone's got any closing remarks or anything like that, or anything they want to add before we head off.
They can at us on social later.
Yeah, I think Sarah's like very much like my notifications are going off. So okay. if you follow like Rise and Shine, then you'll find us, everyone. But anyways, thank you so much for tonight. I think we're going to end it there.
Thank
you, everyone.
Bye.
For putting this on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
And then say